The River Rescue by Anne Field. Yesterday, I watched the June heatwave end. Tourists and locals ran for cover when the first heavy drops splashed onto parched streets. Shops found themselves used as havens from the downpour. People packed aisles to wait for the rain to ease, yet there was no let-up. Despite optimistic comments of, "It's only a shower," it soon became obvious a drenching was unavoidable. Tanned legs and arms clad in shorts and T-shirts dashed for the shelter of cars. Others ran with cardigans and newspapers covering their heads, desperate to reach home. Within half an hour, our town was deserted. If a plague descended upon us, I cannot imagine the clearance of bodies would be as swift. Dogs and children were snatched indoors. Shutters closed and sandbags lined the doorways of vulnerable dwellings. Worried faces peered from dripping window panes at the deluge flowing down either side of the streets. All the while, the council hoped the antiquated drainage system held up against this unseasonal attack. As the hours passed, the deluge turned our gentle river into a fast-flowing, murky torrent. The brown water brought floating branches and debris from upstream. It began to creep up the grassy banks, swallowing up the plant life growing along the verges. Now the council had new worries, as engineering experts advised on evacuation procedures, a precaution should it worsen and burst its banks. Night-time fell quickly for a summer evening, and lights shone from houses at an unusually early hour. All night it continued to pelt down in vertical sheets and filled the gutters, which in turn filled the shores, flowing through the drains and into our river. By morning, the cloud cover changed to a dull grey. The rainfall reduced itself to a more acceptable drizzle, and people emerged out of their houses, back in contact with each other once again. The topic of conversation was how close they had come to being flooded from their homes by the bursting of the riverbanks. Everyone felt huge relief and gratitude at having escaped such nightmare. The roar of the river's water could be heard as never before. Townsfolk gathered to watch in wonder at the spectacle of the swollen river. We lined the banks from the safety of gravel pathways to gaze at the remarkable scene below. Drips of water fell from the brim of my straw hat, as I too gazed at the froth bubbling around a fallen tree. It lay half in and half out of the river, beside a gaping hole where it recently had its roots secured. All its leafy branches were outstretched and bent backwards with the force of the flow. On the opposite bank, the surge navigated furiously around the impediment of a rocky outcrop. Children with their brown legs stuck into brightly coloured Wellington boots delighted in throwing available pebbles and cheered if they hit any of the floating debris as it rushed past. The adults, sensing the potential danger, manoeuvred them back and away from the slippery riverbank. A crowd stood on the bridge. They leaned over the ledge and stared downwards from the safety of the man-made viewing point. Wide-eyed children stuck curious faces between the balustrades. The river was providing this attraction free of charge and entertaining locals and tourists alike. The noise of the water was loud as it streamed past at an incredible speed. In all my years, I have never seen our river reach such high levels. The arches beneath the bridge appeared so much smaller, with barely enough room for maybe a canoe, but nothing bigger. No one expected what flowed into view from under one of the stone arches. An audible gasp, pierced by intermittent screams, followed its arrival. It continued to float until it stuck fast, stopped in its tracks by the arms of the fallen tree, Raging foam rushed to protect it. The persistent waves tried and tried again to cover the sight from our prying eyes. As a group, we leaned forward for a better view. The sound of sirens rose above the roaring river. Children were turned and quickly shepherded away. Tears mixed with raindrops flowed from faces frozen in horror and shock. Edvard Munch came to mind as replicas of his painting The Scream passed by me in stark reality. Police cars and a fire brigade truck screeched to a halt. Abandoning their vehicles, they rushed to the cause of the alarm. Fast on their tail came the Civil Defence Unit in their distinctive van. We watched it make deep, muddy tracks as it drove down the riverbank. We admired the skills of the driver as it remained on the slope and did not end up in the water as feared. With the aid of a loudspeaker, a uniformed policeman advised everyone to go home, assuring us there was nothing more to see. In fact, there was quite a lot. There had never been anything like this in my living memory. I felt compelled to stay as I had seen that little bundle arrive. Most onlookers moved away, whispering questions to which no one had any answers. Where did it come from? What could it be? I, along with the remaining townsfolk, formed into a tight group. Standing with shoulders nearly touching, we observed the proceedings. The fire brigade unconnected the coiled hoses and let them roll down the slippery grass. Men hauled ropes and clasps along with assorted equipment in metal boxes from the back of the civil defence van. The police were busy erecting plastic crime scene tape to keep inquisitive people at a safe distance. Movement from below brought with it a hush. Silence descended. I removed my hat and held it tightly to my chest, biting my lip to quell the rising lump. My eyes bulged with the effort to see more, and to blink was a risk. The seconds ticked by. Voices rose from down the slopes, still audible above the roaring torrent. Instructions and warnings shouted between the rescuers as they carried out their dangerous task. Animated and louder, the yells drifted toward us. They sounded disjointed at first to our straining ears. Then we watched as two large hands untangled that little bundle from between the branches. I physically tensed, and we stood rigid, feeling the need for solidarity and closeness. A diver, in a gleaming wetsuit, emerged and gingerly made his way up the slippery slope to a more level footing. In his hands was the river bundle. Water poured from the white head and limbs. The eyes were open, angled down onto chubby cheeks. The diver looked toward us, awkward and embarrassed. Then he placed into the back of the open van a baby doll. A palpable sense of relief rippled through us. The feeling of dread flowed downstream and far away.